Hi, I'm Harry Rock, and welcome to another edition of Westfield Council on Aging Presents. This is a special collaborative effort with Tina Gorman, Executive Director of the Westfield Senior Center, and Pete Coles, producer of WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15. Our topic today is fire safety with older adults. And for all of you listeners and viewers that tune into this show on a regular basis, you'll notice that our backgrounds are different. That is because our producer, Pete Coles, is actually down in Virginia right now covering a SpaceX rocket launch. So he is organizing and producing this from Virginia, which shows the strength of our electronic capabilities here. So Pete Coles, thank you so much for taking time out of a busy schedule and enjoying hopefully some decent weather down there. And I do want to give a special warm welcome to Deputy Chief, Westfield Fire Deputy Chief Ben Warren, who really excited to have you on the show today to talk about fire safety with older adults, because it is such a critical issue. And unfortunately, reading about fires in the newspaper and seeing reports about it on the news is not an uncommon thing. And unfortunately, as I was prepping for this, I saw many of the root causes, which were the things that I've seen on television as to why fires have started and why injuries are even worse have occurred. So anyway, excited to have you, Ben. I always like to start a little bit just to give our people, our viewers, a sense of who their guest is. How long have you been with the fire service here in Westfield?
Well, I started with the fire department. I was hired back in 2001. So I've been here just about 21 years.
Wow.
21 years this summer. So worked my way up through the ranks. I started as a paramedic and then got promoted to captain, where I served at an engine company, predominantly at Engine 3 on the north side of the city, before getting promoted to this position and coming back down to headquarters.
Have you always been just with Westfield, or were you with any other departments before that?
Before that, I grew up in Southampton, and I started out when I was in college as a part-time firefighter, an on-call firefighter up in Southampton for about 6 years before I came down to Westfield.
Wow.
So
was this career path something that you knew right from the get-go when you were a kid that this is what you wanted to do?
No, I actually kind of fell into it, and now that I'm here, I'm glad I did. This was definitely the right spot for me and the right direction for me to go. But no, honestly, this sounds weird, but it all went back to a ninth grade civics project where we had to do community service hours in the town. So my father, being from Southampton, knew the fire chief. They were good friends from years back. So he said something to the fire chief about it. And my civics work, my community service, was to go down there and work at the station, washing trucks and doing chores and stuff around the building. And it just went from there. So when I got old enough, I actually joined the department and then took the test to get hired full time. And that's what landed me down here in Westfield.
Wow. Very interesting. What are the various roles? I think that firefighting has changed a lot since the original days of,
Yep.
What are the different roles that you have now?
Now it's more of an all hazards type of an approach where we deal with all sorts of emergencies that just, was not something that cities or towns even dealt with back in the 1800s. But I'd say that the biggest change to it is the addition of emergency medical services, in running the ambulances and the health-based aspects of the job. That's something that back in, like I said, in the 1800s, then that was not even on anybody's radar. But nowadays, because of how fire departments are situated with our place in the community and our strategic locations around the city, that we have, we're very well suited for doing that work. And that's actually nowadays, that's our primary focus, is the ambulance side of it, because we try to focus on everything, but that's definitely the highest volume of work we do. So is the ambulance calls just overshadow the numbers of big fires by a long shot.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Really
that's
interesting.
The biggest change. And also we do a lot with, hazardous materials responses and things like motor vehicle accidents and stuff like that. We do have a large highway. We've got the turnpike coming through town, and we've got a lot of industrial occupancies on specifically on the north side, and it creates a lot of different problems for them. So the big thing for us is we've got to be able to do a lot of different things well, because we have a lot of different hazards that we have to be ready for.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Well, the other thing that I want to point out that you do very well is community service projects too, because when I was the head of the Westfield 350, I certainly needed the help of the fire department with some of the different things that we were doing. And I know that, fire department, the chief and deputy chiefs and your personnel in general have always stepped up whenever we've asked for anything in town, regardless of the group. If it's anything from helping with safety at a concert or parades, or just doing, a special project for kids at a church, for a church group, you've always been there, and it's huge, and we really appreciate that sense of community collaboration.
That's certainly our pleasure. And the people who are attracted into this business, they end up here because they want to serve. They want to work for other people in the community. And that's what I think drives so much of that, is that to do this job and to do it well, you have to want to give something back to the community.
Yeah.
And so we're uniquely situated for that too. And that's why we are so involved.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, listen, let's jump right into our topic here, of fire safety for seniors. We have obviously a significant senior population here in the community. Mm-hmm. Tina Gorman, who's our executive director of the Westfield Senior Center and the Westfield Council on Aging, really felt strongly that this should be one of the topics that we cover. And I agree with her. I've learned a lot just prepping for this with all the notes and information she gave. So why don't we just start working our way down and probably, start with the most basic fundamental thing, which is smoke detectors. And
Definitely, that's single-handedly, that's the number one things that seniors can do to protect themselves, is in case there is a fire, is to have something in their home that's going to warn them and wake them up and alert them so that they can get out of their house and get out safely. That is one of the biggest advances that's come across in the fire service in generations as far as saving lives. They're fairly inexpensive. They can be installed easily, and the savings that they can give you over time, they could save somebody's lives. That's one of the first things we talk about when we go to fires and doing an investigation, is we ask people, do you have smoke detectors? Were they functioning? Did they operate? And we make notes of it to see, because so many times we found fatal fires where there was no smoke detectors in the house. And smoke detectors they're gonna alert you so that you can respond faster and get out of the house and can save somebody's life. So they're really important.
Do smoke detectors have to be hardwired, or can you just buy a remote unit that you put on the ceiling or on a cabinet?
That's a tough one with a kind of a long answer to that. So there are different types of smoke detectors that you can buy. Like you said, the hardwired ones that are interconnected to all the other smoke detectors in the house. Those are obviously the safest, but it's hard for these older homes to rewire an entire house like that, because obviously these homes that were built in the early 1900s, that was before there was even such a thing as smoke detectors, so they never had provisions for it. So that's where you would use the battery operated ones. So as far as what's required, it depends on when the house was built. And doing smoke detector inspections, if anybody who sold a house knows, you have to have the fire department come and sign a certificate that says that your house meets all the smoke detector requirements. And they can be very confusing based on when the house was built. So what has happened is, over time, the requirements for the houses have changed. We did not have a building code in Massachusetts until 1975. And as soon as the state adopted a building code, that's where the requirement for hardwired interconnected smoke detectors first came into play. So if your house was built before 1975, you use the battery operated, because it's too hard to go back to a 200-year-old house and tell people, wait a minute, you've had this house, it's been in your family for generations. By the way, you have to go back and start ripping down walls and running wires. That's kind of impractical. People aren't gonna, that's not gonna work. So that's why we use the battery operated ones on those houses that were built before 1975. So those houses built after 1975, they had to meet the building code for that time period. And that's what tells you that you have to have smoke detectors that are hardwired and interconnected. Now, to make it more confusing, as time has passed, we've adopted newer versions of the state building code that have changed the requirements. So the newer the house is, the more smoke detectors that are required. After 1997, that's when they decided that it would be better to have smoke detectors not only on each floor of the house, but also in each bedroom too. And then after a while, they started saying we added in the requirement for heat detectors in garages, and then they added in the carbon monoxide requirements. So a lot of it has to do with what year your house was built. But that being said, if you have no smoke detectors in your house, that's no good to us. So we definitely want to go with the easiest route to get them up, and that was battery operated. So there definitely, it depends on when your house was built as to what the requirements were. The good thing about the hardwired detectors is they always have a power source unless you lose power, at which point they have a battery backup. But the other things they do is that if one smoke detector detects smoke, all the detectors on the system will sound. So let's say you have a fire that starts in your basement, and the basement smoke detector is the one that detects it. If you have a smoke detector in your bedroom on the second floor, that's going to be a lot louder because it's right in the same room as you when you're sleeping, and you're going to hear it. Whereas if you have just a battery operated downstairs, you may not hear it because it's too far away in the house, maybe on the wrong side of closed doors. So that's the benefit of having the hardwired detectors.
You know, that I just learned something. I never realized that, this house was built in 1990. So ours are, I'm just looking around right now. So they are hardwired, but I didn't realize that if one goes off, it'll trigger all of them to go off.
Yep.
I did not know that.
So that's the value of having smoke detectors in the bedroom is most often very few fires start in bedrooms. Fires start in kitchens, and they start in heating equipment, wood stoves, things like that, and other parts of the house. But by putting the hardwired detector in your bedroom, yeah, there's always the off chance that a fire could start up there. But it's to put a speaker in the room. It's to wake you up. Honestly, nobody expects that detector is going to be the one that discovers the fire. That's going to be the one that wakes you up, though, if another detector does.
That is really interesting. That is
from a perspective of like designing a building code, it's a whole lot cheaper to just have those hardwired interconnected detectors to put a speaker in a bedroom as opposed to a full, low voltage alarm system that has separate initiating and indicating devices. So that way you get both in one small package, and it's cheap and easy to do from a building perspective. So that's the value of having a smoke detector in a bedroom is it acts as a speaker. And better for early notification is what that does.
We have these Alexa dots, all over the house now that we used to pipe music and stuff. Are those able to be integrated into fire safety, and can you connect them somehow?
Yeah, there's some work being done on doing that right now, but right now they don't meet the requirements as laid out by the state fire marshal's office. So is it one of those things where if you're not trying to make your house completely code compliant, because that's different than, doing things that can make yourself safer. They're not necessarily a bad idea, but if you go to sell your house, we're not going to rely on that and sell, when you go to sell your house like that. So
yeah,
that was the inspection,
right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I was really thinking about older homes where the difficulty lies with trying to put a hardwired system in or something of that nature. For people that, yes, it can be. And so for people that need to buy, if they have an older home and they just need to buy portable units, I want to explore that for a quick second. I'm guessing you can find those at any hardware store. Is that the best place for them? Or Home Depot, Rockies?
Yep. Exactly. Now, again, and this is where the code is very, very confusing about what's acceptable for smoke detectors and what isn't as far as code goes. In Massachusetts, we require the smoke detectors to have photoelectric technology. There's two different ways that smoke detectors are constructed to detect smoke. One is photoelectric, which basically uses, to simplify it, is a light beam. And if a smoke particle comes into the smoke detector, it breaks that light beam, and that's what triggers the smoke detector. The other type of smoke detector is called an ionization. And those basically use a small piece of very low strength radioactive material, and it ionizes the air. When smoke comes into that chamber, that air that's ionized, it changes the electrical potential in the air, and that's what triggers the smoke or the alarm to go off. Now, those smoke detectors are more prone to having false alarms, which is why the state does not want those in the code, because they don't want smoke detectors out there they're going to create a ton of false alarms, because if that happens, people are just going to take the smoke detectors down, take the batteries out, and throw them away. So the photoelectric is more apt to not have false alarms. That's why that technology is required. But the other thing our state wants, and this is one that I'm really a big fan of, is the 10-year sealed battery. So now for years, we've been telling people every 6 months, change your clocks, change your batteries. But now the new smoke detectors that are coming out on the market, they actually have a 10-year battery that's built into it, and it cannot be changed. You cannot open up your smoke detector and change the battery. You just simply put your smoke detector up. When you put it in, install it, you hit the test button, that activates it. That detector will run for the next 10 years.
Wow.
And you don't have to check the battery. So what happens is, at the end of the life cycle of that battery, the smoke detector will start chirping. It will chirp once a minute, every minute. And that allows you to know that the smoke detector is going bad, and it's basically saying, hey, I've got to be replaced. So the nice part about those batteries is you just put them up there and forget about them, and they're going to work for the next 10 years. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to get ladders out. You don't have to try to climb the ladders. You don't have to run out of batteries in the middle of the night and have your smoke detector just started chirping because the battery's dead. So that 10-year sealed battery, I think, is a great technology. And I think it's just adds for a lot of convenience. We want people to make their houses as safe as possible. And the best way to do it is to make it as convenient as possible. You know?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I did not. I'm already learning a lot with just this conversation. That is a great point. Though 10 years, people kind of just forget about it. And I'm well familiar with the chirping, because I'm always running around. Okay, where is it chirping? We have an open floor plan, so it's hard for us sometimes to isolate which detector it's coming from. So I got to run around and wait for that minute or 2 minutes, however long it takes for it to chirp. But
excellent. Now you can get them for hardwired detectors. Like my house has a hardwired detector system in it. And I actually have ones that have the sealed 10-year battery backup. Those detectors are not very common. They're kind of hard to find, and they're expensive. They were about $100 a detector to get one.
wow.
But the ones that have a hardwired system, those by code, you're still allowed to use like a 9-volt battery backup. So those ones still have to be changed every 6 months. You know, so if it's a hardwired system, you probably still have to change your smoke detector batteries every 6 months. So we're still going to keep telling people that. And we're still going to keep doing our public relations campaigns twice a year when the clocks change for that reason, because you still need those battery backups in case you have a long duration power outage, which that's happened. It happened in the October snowstorm. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago?
Right, right.
We were, you know, there are places in Western Mass that were out of power for close to 2 weeks. RG&E is great, so we didn't have that problem here in Westfield. They had everybody up and running fast, but other places, you know, you still need to have those battery backups. So you still have to do the checking every 6 months.
To your point, we live up in Middle Farms, which is right by where on North Road, where Kaczynski's farm stand is, right on the edge. You're right, Russellville, right on the edge of Wyben. And we were out of power that storm. We didn't have power. We had no heat, water, or electricity for 10 days. So that's interesting. I never even thought about fire safety, because we were using candles everywhere to try to, you know, keep our room temperature up and just for light and stuff. So.
And those 9-volt batteries are what's going to hold you over and still give you smoke detector protection. So they're very important. Very important.
So for people that buy a portable smoke detector, where do you mount it? My assumption is as high as you can, because smoke rises.
Yep. So basically what we tell people, and what the fire code says, is the locations for the battery operated smoke detectors, and all smoke detectors, the base requirements is at the bottom of one on every level of your home. So that would be, you know, including the basement. It does not include the attic unless the attic is finished over and climate controlled, right? That's the only time that you would have to. So if you finish your attic over, that's a living space. You need a smoke detector up there. If your attic is unfinished, you don't need it. You don't put anything up there. And now the reason for that is smoke detectors have a range for climate that they can operate in of temperatures. So attics can get really cold in the winter and they get really hot in the summer. And if you keep subjecting the detector to that, it's not going to function. It's not going to do what it's supposed to do. So you don't need it in an unfinished area like that, but you need one on every level of the home. And specifically, you want it at the base of the staircases leading to the floor above. Now, the reason for that is
Oh,
if you have a fire on the first floor, that detector will activate before it fills the staircase with smoke, right? You want it to know, you don't want to have the detector go off after that smoke has filled the staircase and it's not passable anymore. So that's why you want to protect the staircases. So you put one at the bottom of every staircase.
Hmm.
And then the next thing you do is you put it in each common sleeping area. So what that would mean is, like, let's say most houses have their bedrooms off of a hallway. You put one in the hallway outside the bedroom doors. Because again, most people sleep with their doors shut at night. So you want it outside to alert everyone of any problems there.
that is the great tips there. I never would have thought of the bottom of a staircase, but that makes so
Yep.
much sense.
It's definitely at the bottom of the staircase. A lot of people think that you're required to have them at the top of the staircase, which I'm never going to say putting an extra smoke detector up is a bad idea, but that's not where it's required. Now, it turns out with most houses that if you go up the staircase, you end up in a hallway with all the bedrooms. So the detector will end up there, not because it's the top of the staircase, but because it's outside each common sleeping area. So the two are kind of the same, but you don't necessarily have to have one at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, really interesting.
Near the bedrooms.
Well,
So,
bottom line to all of our viewers, change your batteries and make sure you have working smoke detectors. And the other question I have, actually, can smoke detectors go bad? Do you have to think about replacing them periodically?
They
The
do.
unit?
They do. Every 10 years is the maximum shelf life for them. But if your smoke detector starts beeping once a minute, every minute, that's what your detector is telling you there is that's an error message. It could be just the battery, or if it's got the 10-year sealed batteries, it could mean the detector's going bad. Either way, if a smoke detector is 10 years old, the accuracy of it starts to degrade. And so at 10 years, that they consider that to no longer be safe. So every 10 years, you need new smoke detectors, unfortunately.
So you're all right. So as I'm looking around, I guess I have some work to do because I don't think we've ever replaced our smoke detectors.
And that works for both hardwired and battery operated smoke detectors. So all smoke detectors have, when you take them down, they've got a date on the back side of it. So the only ones that don't are so old that they needed to be replaced anyhow. So they started putting dates on them back in the early 90s. So if your detector is over 10 years old or doesn't have a date on it, then it's way out of date and it's got to be replaced.
And when you replace them, they're all interchangeable. So it's like not brand specific or anything.
Yeah, I'm not positive on that one. If you have a hardwired system, I'm not entirely positive. They should all communicate, but I would have to research to see if you need to stay with the same brand. But the thing is that if you have a hardwired system, like in your house, they probably all got changed at the same time. So at that case, I would just buy all the same detectors. All the same. The other thing is
Great.
the different brands of detectors actually have different plugs that need to be wired in. When you buy the detector, they actually have a short pigtail that you actually wire in to your outlet that the electrical box that the detector is mounted to. So that's another reason why you want to stay with the same brand, so you have the same plug style that goes into it. Otherwise, you have to have come out and isolate the circuit, turn the circuit off, take the wire nuts off and change it. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to do.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with those little plug things you have to stick in there. Yeah. Okay. Great
It's
tips.
not easy.
Let's move on. Cooking safety tips. I'm guessing you mentioned that the kitchen is definitely a common source for fires and fire accidents. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Definitely. Just because you have, your ovens and your stoves, it's really easy to have things fall onto burners. It's really easy to accidentally turn burners on when you're not paying attention. Or to have, like with gas stoves, sometimes they still have ones that still have the pilot lights in them. So you can still have a lot of different exposures there for things to fall onto the stove and start on fire that way. Not to mention, it's real easy, to accidentally start a fire in your frying pan while you're cooking. At which point, the best thing you can do there is, if it's still in the frying pan, is to just simply put a lid on it. Don't try to use water or anything like that on a hot grease fire, because that's just going to spread the fire out. start off putting a lid on it. And if that doesn't do anything, that's when you call the fire department and get out. So the other thing is keeping, I know a lot of people will keep pots and pans. They will actually put them inside and store them inside their oven if they have a small kitchen and they don't have a place to store those things. It's real easy to preheat your oven, forgetting that you have things inside of it, and they light on fire. So that's something that can be really kind of dangerous, and something people need to be mindful of is where they're storing things.
Yeah, I had a sister who lived in New York City in a small studio apartment for years, and we would go, and I mean, we used to laugh about it, but I did think about the fact that she used her oven as her library, all her books and stuff were in there because she had nowhere else to store them. Now I'm
That's a
thinking,
new
oh my
one. I've
God,
never heard books, but
yeah, what a
I have heard of
disaster.
pots and pans.
Yeah, I know it. There is a flyer, and I'm going to stick it up here. And I think these are available at the senior center, and then probably through the firehouse itself. I don't know if you have these available
We
for
don't have them
people.
stocked, but we can get them. I mean,
Right.
they came from the state fire marshal's office. So the best place to
Yes.
get them would definitely be the senior center.
Right. And these are really good for our viewers. I know most of you go down to the senior center for your meals, or if you're down there for any other reason, or just want to stop in and pick up anything. But I'm going to try to get this up. We're not in the studio, so I don't have the big cameras available to me, but there's an awful lot of great tips in this flyer. So if you stop down at the Westfield Senior Center, you can pick this up. But again, actually, one of the tips, and Ben, you can speak to this, if your clothing catches on fire, references stop, drop, and roll. What's that all about?
Well, so the whole idea behind that is what it's going to do is it's going to smother the flames by pressing them down against the ground. And as you roll, and what you'll be doing is actually stamping the fire out by doing it that way. That's the best way, because you can just do it. You can do it fast. You can, as soon as it happens, it's hopefully you can do it before your clothing gets completely involved and it turns into a real nightmare. And you can take it and keep it as a small emergency. And by stopping and smothering the fire out, that's just the best way to do it, as opposed to trying to look for water, looking for something to spray it down, or a fire extinguisher.
Great point. And I'm looking at the fact here under the facts column. It references the fact that cooking-related fires were responsible for 45% of all fires reported in 1 and 2 family dwellings, and over 86% of fires in apartments, dormitories, rooming houses, residential board, and care facilities. So obviously, cooking fires are a significant source to
people
fire.
forget things are on the stove, and it's real easy to do, to answer the phone or get involved in something else, and all of a sudden you've forgotten that you've got a pot that's boiling over and eventually is going to catch on fire, start a grease fire, or forgetting something's in the oven. It's not hard to do, and I think that's got a lot to do with it.
One of the tips that they refer, to keep, we're all absent-minded. And it's easy to walk away from something and forget about the fact that you're in the middle of cooking, or you just lose track of time. And one of the things I was reading as I prepped for this was the fact that if you're cooking, if you have to walk away to answer the phone or answer the door or whatever, make sure you bring a spatula or a oven mitt or something that will remind you when you're away from the fact that, oh yes, I need to be back in the kitchen because I got something cooking. So bring something with you that'll remind you of that.
Yep. And so then it's right at the tip of your tongue, and you've got something to remind you.
Yeah, absolutely. I see your automatic lights have gone
The city just put motion detector lights on it, but because I'm sitting at my desk, it keeps going off. So.
Oh, that's funny. Right.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Let's people know that regardless of where we are, we're on the job. But again, as we're waiting for Ben to come back into the picture here, definitely pick up your cooking and your fire and burn safety tip flyer at the Westfield Senior Center. I think you'll find that to be really helpful. So let's move on to electrical and home heating safety. A lot of issues there. And as I was prepping on this, I was learning some things, especially related around power cords and just how electrical fires get started. So why don't you dig into that one a little bit?
So the biggest problem is one of the things that we see is people overloading outlets and overloading power strips. What people sometimes do is plug too many things into a power strip, or sometimes we've even seen it where they will plug one power strip into another power strip, and therefore you can get way more outlets, and then they'll plug it into the wall, and the outlet in the wall isn't rated for the demand of electricity that's coming through and being consumed. So it's really important that there is a time and a place for power strips, but to not abuse them by putting things on them that are going to have a large draw or take a lot of amperage to run, because it's really easy to overload them. As an example, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, this actually came from an incident here in town.
Oh, wow.
Where somebody had plugged something into a power strip and
Wow.
put a ground to a non-ground adapter into it, and it just overloaded it and started it. Now, this didn't turn into a full house fire, fortunately, but it was able to be found before anything really bad happened. But that just goes to show that even with a power strip, you can overload them. Circuits are only designed to carry a certain amount of current, and anytime you plug heavy electrical demand into them, you do have the ability to overload a circuit. So the other thing that we find is extension cords. Extension cords are not necessarily rated to carry the same amount of current that different appliances can take also, specifically space heaters and things like that have a real heavy demand. So we'll run extension cords, and seniors need to be very cognizant. They don't want to run extension cords and leave them on the floor where they're going to trip on them and fall, because that presents a significant hazard to senior citizens. So sometimes what they'll do is they'll put them underneath a carpet or something. The problem is the good part of that is what it does is it makes it so you don't trip. But the problem is now the carpet over that extension cord eventually will rub through the extension cord, and it will short it out, and it will cause a fire by doing that. The other thing is extension cords, when they have a lot of current going through them, will actually heat up, and they can actually light the rug right on fire. And this was an instance that happened not this Christmas, but the Christmas before. It happened down on Meadow Street. Somebody had run an extension cord underneath a carpet to go over to just their Christmas tree, and it started a fire. The person who owned the property wasn't home, and we extinguished the fire, and it had burned the carpet off the floor, and we were actually able to wash down the floor and shovel all the debris out of the house, and we could trace where the extension cord ran on the hardwood floor.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
You could see where it burned up and started the carpet on fire, but it also burned down, and you could see the exact path where the extension cord was underneath the carpet. And that's exactly what happened, is it just overloaded the extension cord, and it was under a carpet. So you can never, ever, ever use an extension cord underneath a carpet. And quite frankly, extension cords, they're for temporary use only. If you have something in your house that you want to power that's electrical and it's not near an outlet, either you've got to figure out a way to move it closer to an outlet or have a new outlet installed, because extension cords are not made to just be put into a wall and left there for the next 10 years to power something. They present a lot of hazards to people. So that's something that we want people to be cognizant of, is we don't want people tripping over the extension cords, but we don't want them hidden and starting fires that way too.
How safe is it to that point? Interesting point, because I would say that we're probably guilty of sometimes putting extension cords at Christmas under carpet. I'm learning a lot from this. I'm thinking, okay, we're not doing that anymore. But I'm thinking about if you didn't have a super long extension cord, can you plug a couple extension cords together and run them around the edge of a room, or is that even worse?
Well, it depends on what you're doing with it. Again, it all has to do with the amount of current that you're using.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I don't want to say, yeah, that's fine, because if you get a light duty extension cord and somebody does that and plugs in something that is going to take a high electrical demand, you're still going to have a problem with it. So
Okay.
That's the thing. I mean, especially that's by plugging appliances directly into a wall, they're designed to work that way. The cords for them are designed to work that way. And sometimes you need an extension cord for running different tools or something like that people use them for. That's sort of what they're designed for, not for like a permanent installation. And that's why, because it's really hard to make sure that you have the right cord for the right appliance and it's run in a safe fashion. There's just a lot that can go wrong with them.
Yeah. I'm guessing that Christmas is a tough time for you because people are
Mhm.
plugging so many things in.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. And sometimes, yeah, you do have to use an extension cord to run extension to Christmas lights or something, or to Christmas tree. And that's fine if you use the right size cord and it's not buried under a carpet and it's done in a very safe way, but you're always better off just plugging it directly into the wall if possible.
And for people, again, I've got all these little flyers that Tina Gorman set me up with, a little show and tell here. But again, you can
Yep.
pick up your preventing electrical fires at home flyer. You can get this at the Westfield Senior Center, and it is full of information about how to prevent fires and some of the safe practices that you should be concerned about. And, I think that, what you're hearing today are points that you really want to take into consideration, that, be careful with what you're using for extension cords, be careful how you plug extension cords together, but most importantly, what's plugging into that extension cord and what you're using in that draw of electricity. So really, really important issues. And I'm guessing even, in the summer, people are always setting up fans when it gets hot and
Yep.
that type of thing. I'm thinking we do that, you got to move a fan in front of a bed and you don't have a outlet anywhere near there. So we're running, one of those little round circulating fans.
Mhm.
Um,
And for temporary use, that's fine. Like if it's just a hot day and it's going to be cooler tomorrow, that's okay. I'm just saying, don't use extension cords for a permanent kind of solution to an issue. And you certainly
got
can't
it.
run heavy electrical appliances like an air conditioner or anything like that in them. That's certainly something you
Yeah,
cannot run an extension cord for.
right. Absolutely. So a lot of common sense here, folks. So you keep that in mind. The next topic I do want to talk about, and this definitely, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of this right now because we're into the cold weather heating season, but space heaters and just how dangerous are they and what considerations do you need to take with them?
So with any space heater, the biggest thing is the amount of electricity that they demand, is the amount that they require. They can put a large load on your home's electrical system, and so obviously you certainly cannot use an extension cord with them. But sometimes they can even be so demanding for power that they can overwhelm your house's wiring and stuff. And that's why it's important to keep your home in good shape by having your electrical panel checked by an electrician every few years to make sure that there's no problems with it. If you plug something in and it keeps tripping the breaker or keeps blowing the fuse, that means it's taking too much power, and you gotta really question whether there's another way you can do that, because you're going to overload your system. That's the whole point of those breakers and those fuses, is to protect the home's wiring, to make sure that they don't overdraw the current and start a fire in the walls. So yeah, those space heaters can be a big problem. They definitely can't be your only source of heat in a house, because a 110 space heater that you plug into the wall is certainly not going to generate enough heat to keep you safe and to keep you warm. It's just going to be too dangerous to try to do that. The next thing is that they can light other things on fire, especially if they fall over, if people have things stacked on them, things like that. They can come up to a high enough temperature to start a fire, and so they can be really dangerous. I think you're much better off having your home heating system and making sure that it's well maintained, having it serviced by a licensed either burner technician, or having the gas and electric department come out and clean your boiler every year. They will all do those services for you, and it's better to take care of your designed home heating system instead of using a space heater, by all means.
Yeah, great points. We make sure that our furnaces looked
Mhm.
after every fall, quite frankly, before the heating season starts, and
Yep.
filters are changed and the burners are checked out and all of that. And I think that leads us right into carbon monoxide for furnaces in units that haven't been checked. What are the dangers with carbon monoxide?
Sure. So carbon monoxide is a byproduct that anything that burns, the combustion reaction always puts out different gases. And one of them is carbon monoxide. And if you have, say, a heating appliance that's not, the burner is dirty or the nozzle's not clean on an oil burner, one of the problems it can create is you'll get incomplete combustion. And what we will do is it will put off an extremely large amount of carbon monoxide. Or if the venting isn't good in the house, if your chimney is plugged and it hasn't been cleaned or examined, or if the pipes that lead from the oil burner over to the chimney become damaged or have a hole in them, and it can allow that carbon monoxide to flow out into the house. So the issue with it is you won't necessarily know it because there's no smell of the carbon monoxide. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you won't know it's there until you're sick. And some of the first signs and symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning can be rather benign. It can be things like flu-like symptoms. People can just feel weak, maybe difficulty breathing, sick to their stomach, a headache, little things like that, that they don't necessarily think, hey, is this a problem with my heating system or not? That's why it's so important to have carbon monoxide detectors. And the fire code requires you to have a carbon monoxide detector within 10 feet of every bedroom door. You also have to have them on every floor of the house, including the basement, because they will save you, because they will start going off before the concentrations get high enough to make you sick. And so they're fairly cheap protection, and they will detect what you can't. In fact, something that we started doing here at the fire department a number of years ago actually is we actually bought carbon monoxide detectors that have a non-changeable battery, and they don't have any switches or anything on them. They just, as soon as you activate them, they just run until the batteries go dead. And what we actually did was we zip tied them to the handles of the first aid kits on the ambulance, so that when the ambulance shows up,
Oh, sure.
we actually take that gas meter into the house. The crew, they've forgotten about it, that it's even on the handle. They're not paying attention to it. They're paying attention to other things. But if they're in there working on a patient and all of a sudden their bag starts beeping at them, we're actually monitoring the air passively as we go into a house to see if there's a carbon monoxide problem. Because most of the time there's not. Very few times really is there an actual problem. But it's just a way to alert our crews passively without having them even have to think about it. And it's getting monitored all on their own. And we've had a couple instances where we've gone in and somebody's got reporting flu-like symptoms and they're taking them to the hospital. And sure enough, the bag starts beeping as they're in the house. And it's comes to find out it's not a medical problem. I mean, it still has to be treated. The patient still has to go to the hospital, but the cause isn't medical. The cause is environmental. And the cause turns out to be you need an oil burner technician to come in and fix your boiler. So, or a gas technician or somebody like that. So that's one of those steps that we take to check the environment every time we go into somebody's house. And that seems to be working pretty well over the past number of years. The other thing we have is our cardiac monitors have the ability to, if we suspect it, we can put probes on people's fingers and we can detect whether there's carbon monoxide in their blood. And we can see whether they've been poisoned, because this is one of those things that it's a cumulative thing. A low level exposure over a long time can still produce effects. It's not necessarily a high level exposure on a short duration. It can also be a low level for a long duration, and that's harder to pick up on. So we've got a couple different strategies we can use to combat it. But the best thing we can ever do is have people put carbon monoxide detectors in their own home so that you can be alerted to a problem long before we are. And if your carbon monoxide detector goes off, definitely call the fire department. Definitely have them come out and check your house. And what we'll do is the engines will come out and they've got a separate meter. Sometimes it could just be that your carbon monoxide detector is bad, but they will go through the house with a separate meter and they will double check it. And that way we know. And people say, well, we don't want you to come out with a big truck or anything like that. Absolutely not. That's exactly what we want to do, because we want to send our crews out there. We want to make sure that they're safe. And quite frankly, when our crews are on duty, they're assigned to their truck. They cannot leave their truck. They cannot be away from it. Because when they leave your house going somewhere else, they might have another emergency. And they've got to be able to respond to it. That's why that crew is always, always, always has to stay by their truck the entire duration of their shift. So yeah, your call may not require a big, huge fire engine, but we're not planning for yours. We're planning for the next one. And that's why we never separate them out. So having the fire department show up is with the truck is don't worry about that. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. And we'll come out and we can check your house and be sure of it, because we would rather have the peace of mind knowing that people are okay, instead of just saying, well, my carbon monoxide detector keeps going off, it keeps beeping, so I'm just gonna put it out in the garage, or I'm gonna put it in the trash and not worry about it and go back to bed. That's exactly what we don't want to have happen.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And you actually, it reminded me a few years ago, it was actually on the eve of that big October snowstorm that we had that we were referring to earlier. My wife and I woke up in the middle of the night and our CO2 detector was going off, and turned out the heat plate in the furnace had cracked.
Mhm.
And so we had carbon monoxide, and we actually smelled the smoke and stuff. So we immediately just, fortunately, we heard it, woke us up. We ran around, went downstairs. I was checking for fires first, and I realized what was going on because I could smell the smoke. And then we just started opening up windows and doors and everything, and just airing the house out. And
Mhm.
then we had to get the thing repaired. But you can't not be safe enough. That's a
Yeah.
great point.
And by having our crews come out and go through it. And the other thing that we will do is if we
He's in the dark again.
Exactly. If we can locate the source of the carbon monoxide, and then we can call the gas and electric department, and they have gas technicians that are on duty all the time, and they will come out and they will fix it. So that way nobody has to go through the night without heat. If your house runs on oil, then you've got to, use your oil burner company to come out and find
Right.
the problem, but to come out and repair your heating system. But we will come out and we will try to locate it and at least look in the right direction. And that's why it's so important to call us and not just assume that it's nothing.
Right.
Pardon me, I gotta turn the mic back
Yeah,
on.
go ahead and move around. So I just want to remind our viewers, as you've been watching and listening, to make sure that all of those appliances and those heating units are looked at, that you have maintenance every year. Don't just reset a circuit breaker. If a circuit breaker pops, it means it's overloading for a reason. So think about what you've got plugged into that and what the reason for that overload would be. Don't just keep resetting it and expecting and then complaining about the fact that it it keeps tripping on whatever you're trying to do. Probably you're doing something more than you should be. Let's move on to home oxygen, because that is and I've got a flyer here again from the Westfield Senior Center, using home oxygen safely. On the news, the news always picks up on home fires, and all too often they reference, there was one just in the last couple of days of somebody where it was diagnosed that a woman, I think, was smoking and who was on oxygen, and the fire started. So very common cause, but again, at the Westfield Senior Center, some great information. So stop down and pick up this flyer. But Deputy Chief, why don't you just speak quickly to the safety of oxygen in the home?
So oxygen is one of the main components that's required to have a fire. And normally we have a level of oxygen in the air, which is about 21%. And that's what we breathe and everything like that. But to have a fire, you need to have oxygen in it. And that's part of the chemical reaction that takes place. If you have an environment where you have a huge level of oxygen present, it can really accelerate that fire, and it can make things that normally wouldn't burn very easily. And what happens sometimes is when people are using oxygen, that oxygen actually can saturate into their clothes, and it can, pool under, covers and things like that, in beds and stuff like that, which normally wouldn't be a problem unless somebody is also smoking at that time. So we unfortunately have seen this case where it happens here in town, where somebody does smoke while on oxygen, and that oxygen saturates into their clothing and into their bedding and things like that, and it basically lights it on fire, and it accelerates the fire to the point where you can't put it out, and it makes for a really, really bad situation. So we can't stress enough that if you are, obviously from a public health perspective, we would like for people to be able to quit smoking, but we also realize that that's not necessarily easy to do. So the main thing we can do is educate people that if you do still smoke and you are on oxygen, to shut your oxygen off, give yourself 10 minutes, let that oxygen sort of dissipate out into the air so you're not in a super highly oxygen enriched environment before you do smoke. Because what it will do is it will accelerate a fire so that it burns so much more faster than can be expected. It can really cause problems for people, and it really accelerates it. So we can't stress enough not to smoke on oxygen.
Yeah, very important. I want to point out another flyer that we have that you can pick up again at the senior center, keeping warm, keeping safe. This is also in Spanish as well as English, but just a lot of great information from the Massachusetts Department of Fire Services. But obviously, we really in Westfield take fire safety really important. And so a lot of great information here that you can pick up again at the Westfield Senior Center, and contact them or stop by for whatever you need. But important to really be as safe as possible. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the friend form, because I was not familiar with this. And when I was prepping for this with Tina Gorman, she made me aware of the fact that seniors in particular can fill out a form and have it registered. Actually, let me have you talk to that, because this is your area of specialization.
Sure. So what we do is we have, obviously our dispatchers are on 24 hours a day, and we have a computer program that we use up there for keeping track of all the calls and stuff we do and how we operate our department. One of the things we will do is we will make what we call a site file for somebody who has special needs. And we can put right into that computer that if you go to a certain address, if there's any special considerations that people have, if somebody has to use oxygen in the house, if somebody is has limited mobility, if people have certain health conditions that require a higher level of response, or some type of issue that's going to need a greater level of care than most emergencies. By having that information saved in the computers, we can know that ahead of time, and we can plan for it as soon as the emergency happens. It's just a way for us to be more prepared to deal with anything that may happen in your home. So by filling out that friend form, what it does is it allows our dispatchers to know what they have, what special considerations might be present at a certain address, and keep track of them through our dispatching computer. And it's just a way for us to organize information that can help us deliver a better end product to the residents of the city. By knowing some people have, different infusion medications that they take on a 24-hour basis. We've had people with different types of heart conditions where they have, different types of, they're called LVAD, left ventricular assist devices, which are basically battery operated pumps that people use to increase their circulation. That's really important for us to know these things, because it's going to change how we treat these patients and where they have to go and what hospitals they need. So that's a great way for us to get that information and get it into our computer systems. So I encourage everybody, if they have the ability to fill one of those forms out and get it back to our communications department, or drop it off at the fire station and we can get it up to them.
Yeah, I thought this was I was not aware of this. And I just think it's a fabulous tool to help anybody to have information on file, so that when your crews have to go out, they've got some information ahead of time. But this will go into medical issues that people may be dealing with, information that responders need to be concerned about, alarm systems that exist and who they should contact if alarms are going off, emergency contacts, and then just some basic fundamental information. And you can again pick this up at the Westfield Senior Center, the easiest place to go, or possibly, as you mentioned, at the firehouse. And then you simply send it to the Westfield Public Safety Communications Center at 179 Appermont Way here in Westfield. But really, really encourage you to do that. And then, as part of that, there's the house number visibility project that kind of goes along with we got to get, if there's an emergency, we got to get the crew to your place. We have to find you. What is that project all about?
So basically what we want to do with that is we want to make sure that everybody has, their house has a number on it. And the number is fixed to the house in such a way that it's easily visible from the road. Now, granted, there are those outliers, those driveways that the house is not visible from the road. So in that case, you need to definitely have it on the mailbox next to your driveway or on some type of a sign next to your driveway. The point is that a lot of times it can be hard to find houses because there are different places around town where the numbers don't necessarily run in an orderly fashion for different reasons. We found one just recently where we've got some houses or some commercial businesses that are out of order, and some of those situations go back to the 1950s where either a mistake was made in a property card or property was subdivided down, and that changes the order of the numbers and things like that. So by having it permanently affixed to the house, it just makes it so much easier for us to find it in an emergency. It can be tough sometimes with some of these houses, especially if you have, landscaping, shrubbery and stuff like that that grows up around your house. It makes your house look beautiful, but if it covers the number, it makes it harder for us to find the actual house. It can be tough sometimes. So we do have computer programs that we try to use in GPS to locate houses, but that stuff is not foolproof, and there are mistakes in it from time to time. So the easiest, clearest way is the simplest way. Put the number right on the house.
Yeah, good.
On the street.
Great point. And to help the crews when they're coming to your house, if you have to call, can you talk about clutter and just the ability of people to get in with their equipment?
Certainly. And that's one of those things that for a lot of different reasons, you have to have clear pathways throughout your house, whether it be for us trying to get in to help you, or before we get there, if there is a fire, an emergency, you've got to be able to get out of the house. Some people do, they do as life progresses, you do have more and more things that, sort of you collect and you come across and you have. But the most important thing is to make sure that we can still get in and out of the house and that doorways aren't blocked. And as a result, people can move freely through the house. That can be an issue, especially for patients who are, they're in a sicker condition where they have to be carried and things like that. If there's too many things blocking the way, that makes it very difficult, and it just slows the process down, which, time can really matter for some patients, and we got to be able that we can be sure that we can get in and out quickly. There are different workshops that, you can contact the senior center for to help you if that's an issue where you need to start getting rid of some of that clutter and you have too many things that need to be replaced or removed from the house. There are ways to go about it, and reaching out to the senior center would be the best place to start on that.
Yeah, great tips. So to all of our viewers, do everything you can to help these response crews, because you never know if you're the person that's going to need to call the department and get help. So make sure that you are accessible. As we start to wrap up here, I kind of saved the best for last, I guess. This was one that I was not familiar with. I think this is a grant program that Tina Gorman was able to apply for and get through the senior center. And it's called the File for Life. And I know that this is a huge help to your crews. Can you speak to this and what this is that's in my hand?
So basically what Harry was just holding up right there is the File Life envelope that goes on a refrigerator. It's got a magnet on it, so it sticks right on there. And inside of it is a card. And what you can do is you can fill out all of your information about different health conditions and things like that. One of the things that when our ambulances get to somebody's house, that's really important for them is to be able to know what type of health conditions people have and what type of medications they have. By organizing all that information there, they can have quick, rapid access to it. And what it will do is it will help our crews basically with knowing who their doctor is, what hospital they want to go to, and what type of medical history they have. All those different things can make a different, can affect the decisions that our paramedics are going to make in their treatment of you. A lot of times people don't realize when they show up the different amount of medications that our ambulances carry these days. we're up to, I believe there's got to be like 50 medications that we have on the ambulances for different conditions in both chronic and acute. And depending on what medications people are on, it can change what medicines that we will actually administer when our ambulances get on scene. Some of the healthcare that they're giving nowadays is pretty complex. You know, we carry cardiac monitors and things like that, and we can, you know, treat people to a really high level. But for that to work, one of the things that we need to make it faster is we need to have an organized way to get that information. If a patient is unresponsive to us and they can't tell us what's going on, that way we have a hard copy and we have something that's updated. So the other important part about that is if you need one to go reach out to the senior center. I see that they're also having an event coming up in March where they will be distributing those file life packets at curbside. So you don't have to worry about going into a building or anything like that with the COVID restrictions or anything like that. You can get a new file of life there. If you already have one, we can't stress the importance of keeping it up to date and noting anything on it that might be changes. If you have a medication change or a new medication that you are now put on, or if a dosage is changed, those are all things that we can take and that will help us out a lot. The other thing is we will also grab them and bring them to the hospital too, and we can give them over to the emergency room staff there. We're being very mindful to make sure that it gets back home when the patient's discharged, but it can make a big difference for both the on-scene crews and the final doctors that will be seeing you at the emergency room. So those things have been invaluable in my career to know what's going on with people just by having that right there and available quickly on the refrigerator.
And I'm guessing your crews know immediately as soon as they walk in, check the refrigerator door to see if they see this.
Yep, that's something that they've been doing for years and they will continue to do in the future. So it's really helpful for us.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to make people aware of is Deputy Chief Ben Warren, our guest, mentioned these are going to be available to you at the Senior Center on Wednesday, March 24th from 1 to 2. They'll be distributing these. But you can also get this one that goes into your wallet or into a purse. And it has all the same information, just in a more consolidated fashion, but it's identical to what you just filled out for your refrigerator. You carry this on your person so that if you are in an accident or you are in a situation where you're away from home, you can also give this to emergency technician crews, because I think the more information you can give them to do their job, the better they're going to be able to ensure that they can properly take care of you. So really make sure that you get over to the Senior Center and fill these out. The other point that I want to reinforce here, and Tina reinforced this with me, our good Executive Director, Tina Gorman, fill these out in pencil, because information does change. Your medications will change, doctors will change, policy numbers may change, phone numbers may change. This way you can keep it up to date, but make a mental note that when things do change, to get back over, take this off. Don't forget that it's on the refrigerator, but make sure that you do instill those changes. This is to protect you. And the best protection the best advocate you can have for yourself is you. So make sure that you have filled this out properly and as expeditiously as possible. The other thing I want to bring to people's, the last form I actually have from the Senior Center, there's fire safety for older adults, a flyer just filled with information, both front and back. Make sure you pick up this goldenrod one. I think you will find it very interesting to look at, but they refer to the fact that smoking fires are the leading cause of fire deaths for older adults. Electrical fires are the second leading cause of fire deaths to older adults. So watch those extension cords. Cooking fires are a leading cause of injuries to older adults, and no working smoking alarms in 36% of all senior fire deaths. So make sure that you get those fire detectors installed in place make sure they're working, make sure you're checking those batteries every 6 months. I love this idea of the 10-year battery.
Yep.
And I think that even though you mentioned they're $100 a unit, in the scheme of the protection of your life, that's still pretty cheap. And I think it's an investment worth taking. So Deputy Chief Ben Warren, anything else that you can think of? You have been an encyclopedia of information today, and we thank you so much for this. I have learned an awful lot myself, as well as I'm sure our viewers who I know are enjoying the show. Anything else that you can think of that you would want to share with our viewers?
Not really. I think I covered quite a bit there, and hopefully I didn't cover it too much too fast. I mean, there's a lot there, and you know, we just want to see everybody as safe as possible. You know, we're coming through hard times with this COVID pandemic, and hopefully vaccinations are rolling out, and things are going to start stabilizing and getting back to normal soon. So hopefully we'll be seeing more people out and about, and can't wait for it. You know?
Yeah, no, my wife and I, we finally, the only thing good about our age is the fact that we now qualify, but even
Yep.
though we qualify, we're struggling to find a vaccination, a place that we can even get it. But to that point, make sure everybody is going out and getting them. But, you know, Deputy Chief Ben Warren, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank your crews. They're so professional. They're so expedient when we need help. Chief Patrick Egloff, you know, the fire department of Westfield, we could not ask for better service. And when we see those trucks coming with those lights on, make sure you pull over to give them easy and safe access to wherever they're going, whether to a fire or to the hospital. Don't hesitate. I learned that. And don't worry about the big truck coming if you've got a smoke fire or a carbon dioxide problem. The crews will not separate themselves from their trucks, so that's just part of the part of the routine.
Package, so don't worry about the fact that it's a big truck. It's not for your emergency; it's for the next one.
Don't overload those outlets. Make sure that you think about what you're plugging in, and you know, and just be safe around the cooking fire. If you're a smoker, which you shouldn't be, but if you are a smoker, make sure that you don't have oxygen if you are using that for any reason. But on behalf of Pete Coles, our producer, enjoying his time down in Virginia as he covers the SpaceX rocket launch, I just want to say thank you again to Deputy Chief Ben Warren for coming on the show. Just fabulous information. Everybody be fire safe. I am Harry Rock, and you've been listening to another edition of Westfield Council on Aging Presents with WCPC Cable Channel 15. Have a great day, everybody.